Hey, this is Garrett Godfrey from the podcast Good Patron. I have a story for you about that Out of the Gray album. It was actually their Kickstarter campaign for that album in 2014 that I missed. I didn't know about it when the campaign was live. I'd been active on Kickstarter since 2010 for a Lifesavers Underground album called Dog Days of the Indian Summer that became Heaven High. So I was well aware of Kickstarter and had been backing a lot of music campaigns, but I didn't find out about that Out of the Gray campaign until after it had already closed. And it was not knowing about that until it was too late that made me wish there was a podcast that talked about crowdfunding campaigns for Christian artists that I would like while they were still active. I wanted a newsletter or a music website or a blog or a podcast, something that would cover that. And so I ended up trying to talk a few different friends into making that podcast so I could listen. None of them would be willing to actually make that podcast, but all of them turned it on me and said, you should make the podcast. So I did. In 2015, I launched the Crowdfunding Christian Music podcast, and I ran that till into 2017. It was just too much work. It was video and audio. I was doing it every single week because campaigns are always propping up, and I wanted folks to find out about it right away. And it was overwhelming. With two kids and a work situation that was just getting more and more hectic, I couldn't keep up, and I ended up pod fading that show. And then I was approached by somebody, Dave Trout, over at UTR Media. I knew him already because I was one of the critics over at the critics panel there, and he and I were friends. And he kind of just point blank asked me, what happened to your show? And I told him what I didn't know was that he was in the midst of changing UTR from the single podcast Under the Radar to a family of podcasts he was going to be putting out. And he invited me to be a part of what he was doing at UTR with a new podcast that would be once a month. It would be audio only. It wouldn't be the same kind of production work on my part to keep up with. And I was immediately on board. And so we now cover ways to be a good patron and support the artists you love, how to better support them while also still covering those live active campaigns. And I've been doing that show now since 2017. But all of that for both of those shows, including the one I'm doing right now, started because of that single Out of the Gray CD and their Kickstarter campaign that I didn't find out about until it was too late. Now, as I found out later that they had that CD for sale on their website, so I was able to get it. But I don't like missing out on those crowdfunding campaigns while they're live. If I have a chance to support the artist when they need the money, I want to do it. So that's kind of what drove me to create the podcast I'm doing now. But it all started because of a love for Out of the Gray and that album right there. Hope you enjoy the story.